OpenAI released a research preview of their new AI-powered chatbot last week. It's supposed to make interfacing with AI systems easier. I asked it how to create a to-do app in Angular, and it provided me with a surprisingly detailed description of how to do just that. Then I started feeding each step that it suggested back into it as an additional question. For example, it told me to create a new component for the to-do app called to-do list. This will be the main container for your to-do items. And so I would ask it, how do I create a new component for a to-do app in Angular called to-do list that will be the main container for the to-do items? Each time it gave me detailed instructions on exactly how to write the code. It was detailed enough to where I figured if ChatGPT's code actually worked, that it would allow someone with zero coding experience to put together the entire application. So I fed each step back into it as an additional question, and this is what happens step by step. For the first step, it had me run the ngGenerate component to-do list command. It then showed me the code that I need to add to this component and how to declare it in the app module. Now, this wasn't actually required since the CLI does this automatically anyway, but it is still useful to know. It then told me to modify the root component template to look like this. And then that resulted in the application that we see on the right-hand side of the screen now. Just a simple to-do app title with a component that says to-do list works. The next step I needed to ask it was about creating a form with a button to add new to-do items. So first it told me to make the to-do template look like this. So this is close, but it's actually where it made its first mistake. It never told me to include the forms module, which I need to import to make use of ngModel. And it also did not provide a name attribute for this input, which would also cause an error. And the other mistake it made here was in the class. So although it was referencing this new to-do class member in the template, it never actually created it. So I had to add that in manually. So I fixed these errors manually, and obviously someone who does not know Angular would not know to do these things. But still, these things result in errors that would quite easily be Googleable or could even just be fed back into ChatGPT for clarification. So I don't think it necessarily makes this unrealistic. So now we have an application where we have a simple input with an add button. We can type stuff, click add, but nothing happens at this point. So for the next step, I needed to ask it how to use ngFor to iterate over the to-dos array and display each to-do. So it had me modify the to-do list component template to include this ngFor loop, and that was it. Now we have an application where we can actually add items and we can see those being added to this to-do list. So now we needed to add the checkboxes for the to-dos. So first it got me to modify the class to include a completed property, and it also created its own type to reflect this. It then got me to modify the template to make use of this new data and bind the checkbox to the completed property. So now if we enter in some items, we have checkboxes being displayed next to them. So the next step is interesting because it wanted me to create a toggleCompleted function to update the completed property. But this isn't actually required because the ngModel is already bound to the checkbox value anyway. But I'm just doing what it tells me, so I went along with it. It got me to add this toggleCompleted method here and also bind to that in the template when the item is clicked. And then for the next step, it showed me how to use ngClass to add a class when an element is completed, which is what I have done here. So now the items will have a different class applied if they have been marked as completed. And the final step it actually initially asked me to do was to add the delete button. So when I asked it how to do this, it asked me to add this delete to do method here, and then trigger it with this delete button in the template. And then at this point, I had completed all of the initial steps it asked me to do, and we had a working app, but it was a bit ugly, so I wanted to see if ChatGPT could make it look a little more modern. So I asked it, how can I add styles to make it look like a modern to-do app? And it told me to add these styles to the to-do list component, which resulted in the sort of final application that we're seeing on the right here. I can add a to-do item. It is listed here. Let me just add a few of these. We can mark them as completed, and it gets a little strike through styling through it. We can remove items by clicking delete. And generally it's just, a simple but fully functional app that doesn't look amazing, but also doesn't look completely terrible. So I was almost able to create this entire application without using any prior coding knowledge. The only bits where it actually failed was in forgetting to set up the forms module, name attribute, and the new to-do class member. But as I mentioned before, those were all things that someone who didn't have coding knowledge probably could have got by with Googling or asking ChatGPT about the error. So this is obviously a pretty simple case, so to run it through its paces a bit, I decided to extend the challenge a little bit, and I asked it, how could I modify this application to use Firebase as the backend to store the to-do data? And this is where it started falling apart a bit, at least in terms of being usable by someone with no coding knowledge. So I think it did surprisingly well, but it asked me to use the Angular Fire 2 package, which is 3 years out of date. I asked it how to use the Angular Fire package instead, which I think is still fine because the Angular Fire 2 package warned me to use this package, so it didn't necessarily require any prior knowledge. But when installing Angular Fire, it never mentioned using the ng-add schematic, which would configure Firebase in the application automatically. And it was still trying to use the old Angular Fire APIs and also importing them from the wrong place. So even with me intervening and fixing up these mistakes, the code it supplied still did not work. And I figured at this point, we were pretty well beyond being able to easily get this working with no coding knowledge. So I think ChatGPT is interestingly different to GitHub CoPilot. Whilst CoPilot can do similar things, in general, it relies on the developer sort of steering the ship, and then GitHub Copilot can offer suggestions. With ChatGPT, it feels more like it is steering the ship for you, and you are this potentially unnecessary middle step that is just doing what it says. And to be honest, I don't really know what to make of this. I think most people's opinions, mine included, about where this is all heading in the next few years and what it will mean amount to little more than guesses. But it seems so far we have underestimated what AI systems would be capable of. I certainly have been surprised by both ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, not to mention image-generating AIs like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. So acknowledging it is mostly worthless, here is my gut feeling takeaway from this little experiment. What I saw felt like what someone with little or no coding knowledge could achieve with Google searches. Running a bunch of queries and piecing together code from Stack Overflow and elsewhere. It's like that, only maybe 100 times quicker, better, more efficient. And importantly, ChatGPT maintains the context of what code it has already written for you as you requery it. And that's something that you're not going to get when you're searching across 50 different Stack Overflow threads. Where I feel ChatGPT would have trouble replacing software developers in the near future is in dealing with and architecting large or complex systems that need to be maintained over time and require careful planning and forward thinking. The sorts of problems that require the experience built up over a career that can't be solved with just Google searches. But maybe that is just wishful thinking. Chess grandmasters don't just calculate as many possible moves as they can and determine the best one. They use the experience of thousands of games of chess and relentless studying to intuitively recognize positions, what is winning and what is losing, and what a good move would be in certain situations. The popular line of thinking was that computers could not possibly beat chess grandmasters, until they did. Now chess engines vastly outperform top grandmasters. So maybe even veteran software engineers and their wealth of experience will go the same way eventually. Maybe not. So in conclusion, is this thing going to take over the types of programming jobs we do today? Maybe eventually, I have no idea. A popular stance I've been seeing is that we will just utilize AI to handle all of the mundane plumbing work of programming, boilerplates, scaffolding, CRUD operations, removing items from arrays, and so on, freeing us up to work on the more interesting problems that actually matter. But I think we should be suspicious of our willingness to accept that idea because it makes us feel good. Maybe that is just wishful thinking too. So let me know what you think in the comments. Although this does make me somewhat fearful for our future careers, it does also make me excited and hopeful. Either way, it is a remarkable leap in technology to be able to witness, and let's hope we use it well. So if you found this video interesting or maybe just slightly terrifying, feel free to leave a like and subscribe before you go. And I hope to keep seeing you here for more videos before AI makes my YouTube channel redundant.